Hi, today I'm going to go over my lesson presentation that I've created for my education class. My name is Jamie Castaneda. My lesson title is Geometry and Shapes, and my subject is Math. The grade level is the second grade. I also found some of this on the teachers of Texas.gov. So it tells you the student objective for this lesson is the student will recognize how many faces, bases, and vertices are in shapes. They will also be able to transform a smaller shape into a bigger shape. And the TEAK states, the student applies mathematical process standards to analyze attributes of two-dimensional shapes and three-dimensional shapes, to develop generalizations about their properties. It also states the student is expected to decompose two-dimensional shapes such as cutting out a square from a rectangle, dividing a shape in half, or partitioning a rectangle into identical triangles and identify the resulting geometric parts. So the anticipatory set for this lesson is to ask the students to use small shapes to make bigger shapes, to explain how to identify 2D and 3D shapes. Ask the students to find the face, base, and vertices of shapes. The introduction to new material is, did you know you can take one shape and make more shapes? I'm going to use the overhead to go over the shapes and their bases, faces, and vertices. They're going to do a worksheet that will have them find the number of faces, bases, and vertices. We're going to use construction paper shapes for an activity that allows the students to build small shapes into bigger shapes. The guided practice. I'll use the overhead to go over the 2D and 3D shapes and explain how to identify them. I will then call on students to answer questions from the overhead about the shapes. How many faces does the 3D cube have? And then the base and the vertices of that. Followed with a triangle, a cone, a star, etc. Their independent practice. I will pass out their worksheets that ask how many faces, bases, and vertices certain 3D shapes have. I will also pass out their cutout shapes. So as you can see, a lot of this is repetitive, and this is to help them retain the information. So in closure, the students will be able to identify the shapes and complete the worksheet about the 3D and 3D shapes on their own. The students will be able to make bigger shapes out of smaller shapes with construction shape cutouts. So in the discussion I have, it says, discuss the strategies used to meet the lesson objective. Strategies used in this lesson were oral presentation, reinforcement by questioning the students, using shape worksheets as their assignment, and hands-on activities with the shape cutouts. The lesson is for each student to work individually. It begins with direct oral instruction and quiet thinking, and then proceeds into the worksheets that check for understanding of the lesson. And last, a hands-on activity for fun. Students need fun. And learning that allows students to manipulate shapes. I was going to show you these worksheets that they'll be doing. And I'll have them probably over the overhead, which they call it Elmo, to go over some of them with them. And here's a little chart that we'll use. This shows the 2Ds and 3D shapes. So we can go over and we can show the sides, the vertices, and the faces. And you're going to have more faces when you have the 3D shapes, because it's a 3D shape. Then here's another activity worksheet. It's the 3D shapes, and this is actually where you're going to count the sides. And it says faces, edges, and vertices, so that kids would be able to do this worksheet as well. Okay, so now this is I'm going to discuss the development of the lesson. So when you develop a lesson, you want to check the time. You need to make sure you have enough time to teach the lesson, because you have either other classes or you have other lessons you need, maybe science, reading, and so forth. So we can't take one lesson and let it last all day. So we have to make sure we have enough time. And if not, we can always make adjustments. So the next thing is I would write what I need to teach the lesson. So what am I going to use? For instance, the lesson that I'm provided right now requires construction paper for the shapes, and then the worksheet and the shape chart, and with the 3D and 2D shapes, and an Elmo. You will need your overhead projector, and make sure that it's functioning. Make sure the batteries are in the remote. Just make sure everything's prepared. Just try to keep from running into last minute issues. So I also found what I needed to teach for second grade math online at the teatexas.gov. This site has a list by grade and subject of what objectives need to be met for the students. So it tells you, okay, if you're a teacher and you're teaching this class and this subject and this grade level, this is what Texas expects that student to know. Now, it's going to tell you the list, and then, or the little paragraph, it's going to tell you, and then you get to go and create your own lesson however you want. Sometimes you have other teacher friends that help you if you're a new teacher, and so forth. Or you can go online and you can Google some stuff to get ideas. Just make sure you always give credit to the people where you find a lesson. So also, there's the strategies I use to meet this objective. The objective I found is that students need to be able to recognize how many faces, bases, and vertices are in shapes. They will also transform smaller shapes into bigger shapes. I will guide the student with the lecture and examples on the overhead, and will explain to them about the shapes. Then I will have them apply what they have learned on their worksheets. And at the end of the lesson, I will close by allowing them to make shapes out of shapes with construction paper. So the last question, to wrap it up, how the lesson might be modified to meet the needs of exceptional students. So I have included visual aids, a lesson presentation, so they're going to hear me also speak. Not only are they going to be able to hear me speak, they're also going to be able to see it on the overhead projector. So they're going to also see it. We're going to do some group work. I'm going to be calling on people to answer the questions. And then they're also going to get to work with each other whenever they do their construction shapes. They're going to do hands-on. They're going to sit here. They're going to touch this worksheet. They're going to read over it. And independent work. So one of these worksheets, they'll work independently to make sure that they understand it. So as I planned this lesson, I made sure to include different strategies so that I would meet the learning needs of all of my students. So by using all of these different strategies, I'm trying to incorporate the whole classroom body. I want to be able to meet the different types of learning styles that students are able to learn by. So I'm going to wrap it up and get this put up. Y'all have a great day, and thanks for checking in. Bye.